Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be deconstructing the intense psychological appeal of one of anime's most calculated, brilliant minds. But, as we break down this character, we're actually going to uncover a pretty startling truth about ourselves. We'll look at our social interactions and those invisible traps we literally build in our everyday lives. So let's dive right into the stark question. Why are millions of people so obsessed with a character who barely reacts to anything? Is wild, right? But our fascination with Classroom of the Elite's Kiyotaka Ayanokoji actually reveals way less about fictional characters and a whole lot more about you. We like to think we admire his intelligence or his mystery, but as you're going to see, the real attraction is something way deeper. And honestly, it's a little bit uncomfortable.
To really understand his mindset, we first need to look at how we operate in the real world. We've all been told since childhood that competence buys respect and freedom, right? Be good at your job, get rewarded. But, as this brilliantly points out, proving you can handle the weight often just makes you the system's permanent load bearer. Think about it. When you're constantly fixing broken processes, you aren't rewarded with freedom. Nope. You're just rewarded with the permanent, completely unpaid role of the process fixer. You basically become the concierge for everyone else's lack of discipline. All right, moving on to Act 1, the persona. Let's take a look at the mechanics of power. Now, you've got to consider this concept of weaponized incompetence. Usually we think failing is a bad thing, right? But true high performers, much like Ayanokoji, purposefully avoid trivial tasks so they don't get trapped doing them forever. It's totally strategic. When you are just too good at a minor task, you become the path of least resistance for everyone around you. They don't come to you out of respect. They come to you because it's just way easier than thinking for themselves. Just look at the massive contrast between these two roles people naturally play. On one hand, you have the striver. They overinvest, right? Laughing at every single joke, replying to text instantly, and just flooding the room with their presence until the value of their stock basically hits zero. But then you have the architect. The architect uses selective absence and scarcity. They let the conversation breathe. They hold all the power over the striver because at the end of the day, human value isn't a straight line. It completely relies on scarcity and control. So here is the absolutely crucial point, the shadow signal. In any moment of pressure, like a disagreement or a crisis, the person who reacts the least holds the most power. Why? Because they refuse to be predictable. Reacting instantly is basically a confession that the environment has moved you. The shadow signal is just that tiny gap, maybe a few seconds, where you don't rush to explain yourself. You just wait. And by doing that, you prove your internal world is completely secure. That brings us to Act 2, the tactics. It is time to explore master manipulation. Okay, Ayanokoji's absolute most terrifying tool is white knight manipulation. This is a really sinister tactic, and it's used not for romance, but for absolute psychological domination. It's basically when someone portrays themselves as a hero to gain power. But the crazy part? In reality, they engineered the exact situation the victim needed saving from in the very first place. It's wild. Just watch how this protocol plays out when he targets his classmate, Kei Karazawa. Step 1. He observes her fake relationship and figures out she's hiding a past of severe bullying. Step 2. He completely engineers her isolation by secretly feeding false information to her current bullies, manipulating them into cornering her. And then finally, Step 3. Once she is completely broken down, he swoops in to save her. He offers absolute protection, but it's in exchange for her complete cooperation and loyalty. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates his grasp of real-world psychology. Ayanokoji essentially replicates the famous 1960s Milgram experiment, but he does it right there in a school stairwell. By controlling the authority dynamics and making sure there was zero negative reinforcement, he actually manipulates an entire group of students into tormenting Kei. He completely shapes their behavior without ever having to throw a single punch himself. To really wrap our heads around Ayanokoji's uniqueness, let's contrast him with a couple other notorious anime masterminds. Look at Light Yagami from Death Note. He uses his good looks and charm, manipulating people like Naomi Misora by appealing to her ego as a former FBI agent. Or Johann Liebert from Monster, who weaponizes guilt and despair, brilliantly pushing Richard Braun to the edge by exploiting his past trauma and alcoholism. But Ayanokoji? He goes completely cold. He just exploits environmental psychology and group dynamics. So unlike Light's cinematic narcissism or Johann's deeply personal psychological torture, Ayanokoji just flat out refuses to participate in the game of social exchange. He doesn't charm you. He doesn't perform. He remains an entirely empty, completely unreadable blank slate. And you know what? That emptiness is exactly what makes him so unbelievably fascinating to us. Moving right along to Act 3, The Mirror. Let's look past the fiction for a second and examine our own emotional armor. Now, right now, your brain might actually be trying to reject this, but our obsession with detached characters like Ayanokoji, it isn't actually about admiring their strength. Not at all. It is a profound desire for an unconditional vacation from being perceived. We don't actually want to master our feelings. We just want our feelings to be so deeply hidden that no one can ever use them as a weapon against us. Because, let's face it, living in modern culture requires paying this massive invisible tax. We are completely exhausted by constant social signaling. We alter our vocabulary. We mute our excitement. We perform this super casual aesthetic just to stay safe. We are basically constantly editing our personalities to avoid the absolute humiliation of caring more than someone else. It's draining. So when a character gives you absolutely no social cues, no eager smiles, no defensive posture, they act as a blank canvas. Ayanokoji is quite literally a mirror. Looking at his complete lack of performance forces you to look at your own forced laughs, your own carefully timed text replies, and your own awkward, exhausting need for validation. Seriously, think about the last time you typed out a genuinely enthusiastic text message, looked at it, felt suddenly totally exposed, and just deleted the whole thing to reply with cool. We use coldness as emotional armor. We assume that performative boredom makes us look mysterious, thinking that if we care less, we somehow hold more power. But really, it's just protection from rejection. But the cost of this performative boredom is actually pretty severe. When you optimize yourself to take up zero emotional space, sure, you become incredibly convenient for everyone else. But you also turn into a ghost in your own life. If you isolate your feelings for long enough, you don't just protect yourself from the sunburn, you completely forget what warmth even feels like. Okay, let's head into section 4, breaking the loop. Let's look at some actionable steps to actually recalibrate your social value. The good news is you can start reclaiming your power today, like right now, using these 4 steps. First up, the social audit. You quietly cut back on those interactions that completely drain you but give absolutely nothing back. Second, the frame pivot. Instead of constantly over-explaining yourself, just ask questions to redirect the conversation. Third, take a vow of brevity. Try speaking only 20% of the time, but when you do, cut straight to the heart of the issue. And finally, master the pause. Try waiting just 5 seconds before reacting to anything. It proves you're making a conscious choice, not just acting on impulse. Remember, guys, the goal was never to actually become completely cold and numb like some fictional anime mastermind. A life without vulnerability isn't strength, it's simply isolation. Absolute detachment is just a slow, safe death. True strength is learning exactly when to open the gate and let people in, and when it's time to close it. I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought to carry with you. As you navigate your social world today, as you check your text messages, as you sit in your meetings, just ask yourself, are you actually building strength or are you just building a cage? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and stay focused.